Welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. So as you may know, Darden has relaunched its PhD program, and on this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share a recording from a recent webinar all about the structure and design of UVA Darden's PhD program. This conversation features Christian West, Senior Director of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Recruiting here at the Darden School of Business, and Professor Mike Lenox, Senior Associate Dean and Chief Strategy Officer here at Darden. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's a conversation between Christian West and Mike Lenox, all about UVA Darden's PhD program.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I am doing well.
Well, thank you for joining us for this PhD program webinar. Really appreciated all of the insight that you'll be able to bring from your perspective as both a faculty member and senior associate dean. I'm grateful that you took the time out to join us.
No, there's nothing more important than attracting very talented PhD students. So I'm very excited to be able to do this.
Yes, and I want to thank all of our participants for joining us this afternoon here in Charlottesville as well. We're very grateful that you are engaging with Darden and demonstrating interest in our PhD program. We hope that this webinar will be informative for you all to provide a general overview of the program structure, the experiential opportunities and research opportunities you all will have throughout the program. And this is the first in a series of webinars this week. We will have another one this Friday, more focused on the application for the PhD program, featuring the Director of Doctoral Studies, Andy Wicks. So, Mike, I want to get us started with this might be our participants' first time getting to know you. So I wanted to provide that opportunity. They have a good idea of who they are talking to. So can you provide a brief introduction of yourself and your role here at Darden?
Sure. So I have had the pleasure of being on the faculty at Darden since 2008. I'm a member of our strategy, entrepreneurship, and ethics group, which we'll obviously talk more about. My particular focus is largely strategy, though I do have interests that cross over both entrepreneurship and ethics. I've been teaching core MBA strategy for over 20 years now at various institutions, obviously including Darden the last 15 years. And in addition to that, I am also serving as our Senior Associate Dean and Chief Strategy Officer for the past 6 years. There are many elements to that role, many fun things that I get to get involved with at the school. But probably most relevant to our discussions today is I oversee our research centers of excellence, and I also oversee something called the Office for Research Services, which provides research support to faculty and doctoral students and the like in the enterprise there.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. We're going to talk more about those research centers of excellence in a bit. Considering that the PhD program is intended to provide PhD students an introduction to the academy, essentially following a path that you followed to the faculty, I'm curious about your journey to the MBA faculty. What path did you take to ultimately arrive here at Darden?
Yeah, my path was not a linear one by any means. For those of you who maybe have a less traditional path, we're excited to see you as well. I actually started off as an engineer. I did both my bachelor's and master's in engineering in the field of systems engineering, more mathematical kind of field of engineering. And as part of that, I've always had an interest around environmental issues. And that was really a through thread through my work that you'll see. When I decided to go back and get my PhD, I decided to do a pivot, decided to look more at that interface between business, public policy, and also technology. Always have had an interest in technology and technology bent, with a particular interest, again, on environmental issues. So think about business and sustainability and the like. My core training in my PhD, the kind of foundational work is in economics. But again, always with a viewpoint towards understanding business and markets and that interface with public policy. And so when I first got out into the world, I was a junior faculty member at the NYU, spent 3 years there, joined again the strategy faculty there, and was teaching strategy to MBAs and undergrads for a little while. Then eventually moved on to Duke, where I served at the Fuqua School of Business for about 6 years as a faculty member, and then found my way here to Darden over the last, again, 15 years.
Whenever prospective students demonstrate an interest on the intersection of sustainability and technology, I always tell them to check out your Ideas to Action page to see the work that you have been doing, the books that you have been putting out to demonstrate the level of expertise that we have here on our faculty.
Yeah.
Can you offer our participants some insight to the courses that you've been teaching recently here at Darden?
Yeah. So primarily, in terms of my MBA teaching, I again teach our core MBA strategy course for first year MBAs. But in addition to that, I teach an elective called Strategy in the Digital Age. So in addition to my interest around sustainability, as I mentioned, I also have had a strong interest around technology, especially digital technologies. And so a lot of my work in that space speaks to, again, how are businesses dealing with this emerging set of digital technologies, everything from AI to blockchain and the like. And how does that affect the underlying economics and underlying business opportunities in that space? And again, as often as my one, I also spend quite a bit of time on some of the policy and societal issues around digital technology and really the issues that businesses are dealing with. Everything from the ethics of algorithms to when do you give autonomy to vehicles or other types of devices and the like. And that's been a growing interest of mine and a lot of my colleagues as well.
Mike, I'm thinking about your journey from NYU to Fuqua to Darden. What were some of the factors that made you choose to be on the faculty of Darden? We often ask that question of our prospective students. Why Darden? It's at the heart of the short answer question for our PhD applicants. What was the driving factors for you?
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think, one, I would observe, and I can say this from spending time not only at the three institutions I mentioned, but other top business schools, is Darden is unique. It is unique in the way that it approaches business education, and it's unique in the way that it thinks about impact on the world. We are known as the number one educational experience. We take very seriously the teaching part of our profession here. And I think when we think about our PhD program, it is something we keep in the back of our mind, which I think is not always common in PhD programs. I think the second thing that really attracted me was this notion of speaking to the world of practice. It is something we're very explicit about, that while we are serious researchers here, we do work that is very rigorous. We also always have an ear turned to the real world and what is the impact our work is having on that broader real world. So Darden is the type of place that values scholarship broadly defined, thinking about, I've written a number of books in recent years, which isn't necessarily the most common way of doing scholarly output, but that's an opportunity that I would have at a place like Darden. Darden is a place that thinks broadly about the role of business in society. What are the impacts that business has on, in my case, sustainability or the environment or any number of other issues. And I love the fact that as a faculty, we are not siloed. And we'll talk more about the program. And of course, we have our different areas and different areas of focus. But generally, as a faculty, we collaborate across boundaries. I work with colleagues in our technology and operations group. I work with colleagues in our marketing group and so on. And that really just broadens your aperture for what is possible and what the interesting questions are. So it's just a very vibrant environment as a result of this.
Mike, that gives me a great transition to talking more about the faculty. So for this iteration of PhD, our PhD cohort, we're enrolling students for both the strategy, ethics, and entrepreneurship area and the quantitative analysis area. Yeah. I was wondering if you can talk about your colleagues in those two areas, some of the research initiatives that they have, and maybe a couple of shout outs to particular faculty members to give our participants some insight of who they may have the opportunity to work alongside.
Yeah, well, let's start with strategy, entrepreneurship, and ethics. And you highlight two of my colleagues here. again, we are one integrated unit, but the faculty tend to lean on one area or another. Like I said, I kind of self-identify as a strategy scholar. Sarah is a great example of one of the world-leading entrepreneurship scholars. She has done some work, some pioneering work on, in essence, what makes entrepreneurs successful, or what are the factors that drive successful entrepreneurship. And she has a theory, affectionately called effectuation, which describes a process of entrepreneurship that arguably is maybe a little different than the kind of historical anecdotes that people had had. This work has been incredibly influential. She's probably one of the most cited faculty, period, in the entrepreneurship field, but even more broadly in business education. And has spurred literally hundreds of other faculty to kind of follow and advance further her work on this idea of effectuation. Ed Freeman is another luminary in the field. Ed primarily identifies as a business ethicist, though his interests are wide, ranging. He has published hundreds of volumes, very prolific. He is arguably, maybe not even arguably, definitively the forefather for what is called stakeholder theory. And this is an idea and a vision that he had, going all the way back into the 80s, talking about a new way to think about the role of capitalism and the importance of the vast array of stakeholders that businesses face, including, of course, employees, but also what we might call secondary stakeholders, policymakers, activists, communities. And that at the end of the day, what businesses do is they manage this vast array of stakeholders and try to advance their interests. And it's often framed as a counter to what is often attributed to Milton Friedman, the kind of shareholder primacy argument that the only role and purpose of business is to maximize shareholder returns. And Ed has really been on the forefront of a counter movement that suggests, in fact, it's a much broader purview. And this has really become central to a lot of what's happening in the business world today. If you're familiar with ESG, the environmental, social, and governance movements we've seen in investing and in corporate America, a lot of that grows out of some of Ed's original work there. So again, two colleagues that are, again, really leaders in their field and have had vast influence, not only, again, on the academy, but even broader on work that's been done.
And what about some folks in the quantitative analysis
Yeah.
area? It's a burgeoning academic area for us here at Darden, and some really interesting work that those faculty are doing. Could you highlight one or two faculty in that area as well?
I feel some affinity to this group because it has some overlaps with my systems engineering training and background. The QA group is a longstanding group at Darden that has multiple intersecting interests. Think about things like decision theory. How are decisions made and analyzed within organizations? They do work on data science and the application of data science to any number of decision problems that businesses face. And I think increasingly, kind of related back to what I was saying about the digital age, they're on the forefront of thinking about techniques like AI, again, blockchain, the application of these, but also the societal and business implications of these technologies. So similar to SEE, I would say it's an interdisciplinary group with wide-ranging interests that cover a number of quantitative areas as it applies to issues and problems that society is facing.
And one of the things that I try to impress upon Darden students is that while we offer a really compelling experience here within the halls of Sanders Hall or Sands Capitol Grounds up in Roslyn, by joining Darden, they're joining the larger University of Virginia community, where we have 12 other academic schools, and there is this interdisciplinary conversation happening between all of the schools. I was wondering if you could provide our participants an example of faculty working alongside other faculty members from other departments and academic units to really demonstrate the university resources that would be available to them by joining the larger UVA community.
Yeah, well, let me, first, before answering that specific question, more broadly, as you're considering, PhD programs, and specifically why to get a PhD in a business school of this nature, I think it's fair to say that all business school oriented research has foundations in kind of core academic disciplines. Again, I would describe myself as an economist. Ed would describe himself as a philosopher. People have backgrounds in psychology, sociology. In the QA group, they have backgrounds, again, in data science and statistics. Those core areas inform what we do and often provide part of our intellectual home. So as a result, we have a natural affinity and connective tissue with any number of different areas within the university. So at UVA, we have world-class, psychology department, economics department. We have one of the leading business schools on public policy in the Batten School of Public Policy that has faculty there who have very similar intellectual training and even interest to our Darden faculty. My legal colleagues in the law school have some really interesting work that, again, overlaps with some of my interest areas. And I imagine that's true for my colleagues as well. Engineering, especially for the QA group, has very strong connections, especially with, again, the systems engineering group that we have at UVA. So intellectually, foundationally, there are natural ways in which we connect with the university. As a student, I'll point out that both our programs in QA and SEE, while they will provide any number of seminars that are generated by the Darden faculty, the program explicitly encourages and really requires you to seek courses that are outside of Darden. So for example, if you're a strategy student, I'll encourage you to take some courses over in the economics department, microeconomics sequence, econometrics courses for your modeling and statistics. Others might, find paths where they have a strong, again, like psychology training, and maybe we'll be running experiments and the like. Others might go more of a philosophy or religious studies route as a basis for an ethical set of work that you have. And so from a coursework standpoint, you will absolutely be exposed to these other areas of the university by design. And then last but not least, Christian, your kind of original question, how is we as faculty work with other faculty across the university? And again, given what I've just described, it happens really organically and quite naturally, that you'll have co-authors, you'll have projects that you're working on with faculty across the university on various topics. Again, probably too many examples to name of people working together across these different departments. I've worked with faculty directly with the Batten School, worked directly with faculty in the econ department. That's, again, kind of natural for us given the questions that we're asking. I'm getting involved with something called the Miller Center, which is a pan-university institute around the presidency and public policy. And in particular, I'm getting involved with issues that are really fundamental around capitalism and democracy. Again, these are the types of big picture questions that we're able to pursue at Darden, and again, leverage the resources of the rest of the university.
Yeah, Mike, the Democracy Institute is getting a lot of attention right now here at UVA. And of course, there's an obvious intersection with the work that we do here at Darden and the way that we think about the conversation between democracy and business and commerce. So that's good to hear. So all of our faculty have active research agendas, and they have to have some type of research infrastructure to help facilitate that. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier in our conversation about our research centers of excellence. And I'd like to turn there to talk a little bit about that infrastructure and how our PhD students might interact with all of the research centers that we have here at Darden.
Yeah, absolutely. I would actually highlight, two kind of classes of organization. So not on the slide right now, but we have stood up something called the Office for Research Services in recent years, which is very instrumental in helping faculty conduct their research. But as you imagine PhD students, you will also have access to that. And when collaborating with faculty and the like, be using the resources of what we affectionately call ORS. What does that mean in reality? Well, give you one example. If you are a behavioralist, if you're someone interested in running experiments with students and the like, there is a behavioral lab that we have, which is fully staffed and can help run those experiments for you. So as a thought leader, conceiving of experiments to be run, and then they can help execute, find the participants and run those efforts for you. We're also standing up what we are actually calling a data lab, which is basically a set of resources computationally and also people to help with large-scale data projects that might require scraping the internet for particular pieces of data or organizing large data sets that can be easily accessed in the cloud. So that's a real foundational set of support that we provide our researchers. In addition to that, then, as we have on the slide, we have 3 major institutes that are supported, and each of those have many tentacles that go into different topics. But we, by design, wanted not to have dozens of different research centers, but to have some really large institutes that could do some really broad topic issues. So first and foremost is our Batten Institute. I actually ran our Batten Institute for about 7-8 years, serving as an academic and executive director. The Batten Institute is focused on entrepreneurship, innovation, and technology. So again, for the SEE group, these are critical areas, but even the QA group as well, these have some significant overlap. One of the things we try to do with all of our institutes is they are not beholden or within a particular academic area. They, again, are trying to serve the totality of the Darden School across all of our interests. So the Batten Institute might collaborate with one of our marketing faculty on an area around innovation in digital marketing. Our Mayo Center is our probably closest to kind of a financial center focused on asset management. They are actually now reaching out to a broader set of questions around private markets, things like private equity, venture capital. For the programs that we're running, there are some natural affinities here. Again, I mentioned ESG, big movement here in the financial services industry, in the asset management field. Mayo is one of the leaders there, and there's a real nice synergy with the work that, for example, some of my SEE colleagues and myself are doing, which maybe speak more from the corporate side, but interface with that investment community. And then last but not least, our Institute for Business and Society, as the name suggests, this is really our institute looking at that interface between business and society and the ways in which these are interacting. That includes everything from business ethics to policy issues to really just the vast number of ways society and business are interacting. Has a strong connective tissue to our SEE group, but it also has strong connective tissue with our QA group, again, to the extent we're working on things like the ethics of algorithms, the impact of autonomy. All of these can be topics that kind of are enveloped in our Institute for Business and Society. At the end of the day, what these 3 institutes do for us is they provide a set of resources that can help support research, but also amplify it. They hold events that bring scholars and others together, which can be a great networking opportunity for our doctoral students. It gives them greater exposure to what's happening in the world. The translational work really helps expand to this idea of speaking to the world of practice, which can be very helpful when you're conducting your research to be able to have that access, to the quote unquote real world again, to the executives, to policymakers, to others out there in the world, which might end up being sources of a research context for you to do your work. So again, our centers of excellence are designed to be a support and amplification of the scholarly work that we do as faculty, but more broadly as an academic program.
Mike, you sent out the annual reports for these 3 institutes a couple of weeks ago, and I took the opportunity to kind of dig into them to see what was going on. And it was kind of amazing to see, one, the level of productivity that each of the institutes are providing to the Darden community, but also the co-curricular and experiential opportunities that they're facilitating for our students. So I'll point to those as resources for our participants if they're interested in learning a little bit more about the work of the respective institutes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. There's a lot of great details in there.
All right, so Mike, let's turn to the nuts and bolts of the PhD program. I'm sure our participants are curious of, okay, what's the required coursework? What type of capstone or dissertation am I expected to complete? How do they go about that? So let's turn there. We have a pretty standardized curriculum regardless of the format for our PhD students. And you mentioned a little bit earlier the opportunity to take a wide variety of coursework, not only here at Darden, but across the institution. I was wondering if you can kind of speak to the way that faculty would advise students completing these curricular requirements for the PhD program that would be a part of their first 2 years within the PhD experience.
Yeah, and let me start with kind of the overall structure, which I think is very similar to what you'll find in most elite PhD programs, which is a design in which you spend your first 2 years largely in coursework, at the end of which you will have a comprehensive exam, which then launches you into, in essence, the dissertation writing phase of the program. There will still be courses of credit that you receive when you enter into that dissertation writing phase of your work or research work. A lot of them, though, are just kind of more free-form research courses that you are getting credit for. So let's focus on those first 2 years where the bulk of your coursework will be done and credit bearing coursework will be done. As I mentioned before, by design, you will need to take courses outside of the Darden School. And again, largely in disciplinary tracks, depending on where your interests lie. And we've designed the program to be very fluid to meet your specific interests and needs. So let's start with the SEE area. The SEE area is planning to have 2 courses per semester that are SEE specific, basically taught by SEE faculty. Those will include core courses in things like strategy, ethics, entrepreneurship, so our 3 main areas. There'll also be courses in research methodology that we'll be offering. And as you see on the list here, there is also a course in pedagogy that maybe will be taken in your first 2 years. We might also wait until your 3rd year until you have to take that. And that's, I would argue, a unique feature of the Darden curriculum, that we have a specific course on helping you become an effective teacher. Again, our goal is to try to get people out into academic jobs, professorships, tenure track positions. And at the end of the day, while research drives a lot of the hiring process, teaching is still what you're being hired to do. And so being an effective teacher is some of the criteria by which you'll be judged on that job market. And we want to make sure our PhD students coming out are well trained and prepared to go into the classroom. In terms of the coursework, in addition to those kind of required core courses that are being offered by Darden faculty, again, you then get to customize your coursework based on your interests. So again, if you're a more economically driven strategy student, you might take a series of courses in the econ department. If you, again, are more interested in behavioral work, you might end up doing some courses in psychology. For our QA program, you'll probably spend time in our School of Data Science. We're one of the few universities that has a full School of Data Science. That's going to support the work they're doing in the QA program. Again, you might take courses in engineering and the like as well. But again, that is not structured in a way that says you have to do it XYZ. It is actually designed on purpose to allow you to work with the doctoral program to structure it that best meet what your ultimate interests are and your needs there. And then once you kind of finish that bulk of the coursework, 48 hours, that's when you move to kind of the next phase, take the comprehensive exams, hopefully pass, and then move on to your dissertation phase.
Well, Mike, I find it very instructive that we have a pedagogy course and incorporated into the PhD curriculum. As you may know, I did my PhD here at the University of Virginia. Even though one of my areas of research is critical pedagogy, I never had a specific course around pedagogy. And given that we do utilize the case method of instruction here in the majority of our curriculum at Darden, I was wondering if you could amplify that for our participants and as a unique opportunity or a demonstration of learning for a unique teaching style that we have here.
Well, I should probably first clarify that the doctoral seminars that you'll be engaging in, especially those sponsored by the Darden faculty, are going to be small numbers. And so they'll tend to be small group seminars. And this is why we cohort our admittees to try to build a little scale. But there'll be 12 or less people probably in most of those seminars, which again isn't uncommon amongst doctoral programs. So those will be in many ways very similar to the case methodology in the sense that heavy reading and discussion oriented courses. In terms of the general philosophy at Darden, and again, why we're one of the global leaders, I think, in teaching and education, is that we do adopt this case-based method for our MBA students. We are one of arguably two, maybe a little more, who kind of take that exclusive approach, HBS being another one. What I think is distinctive about the Darden approach is that we really emphasize this idea of student-centered learning. And the case is just a manifestation of this idea that to be a little provocative, lecturing is dead, right? Lecturing in a world in which a camera can be placed on you and record what you do suggests that what you need to do in the classroom is something distinctive from that. And so as a result, there's all this work and people talking about flipping the classroom so that you have more engagement and discussion. At Darden, we've been flipping the classroom since day one for over 60 years, and it's just been part of our DNA. So I think if you come to Darden, you do get a fairly unique and different way of thinking about teaching that will really serve you well in your career moving forward. Because again, while most schools are will put a lot of emphasis on your research and your research record, as they should, they're also trying to fill a teaching position, and so they'll be looking for effective teachers. I also just personally find that the general philosophy of how we approach things in the classroom actually spills over to my research as well. And it's, again, about this idea of speaking to the world of practice. How do you have relevancy in what you do? Academia, as you can imagine, can get very esoteric. We could do work that can be sometimes hard to see its practical implications. I do some work, just in full disclosure, that is mathematical modeling that to the average layperson would be very hard to penetrate. But in the back of my mind, as I'm pursuing that work, is always thinking about, well, what are the implications of this? What are the recommendations that might come out of this that I would make to a manager or a policymaker? And I think that desire to kind of keep ourselves grounded really leads to, I would like to believe, more impactful research at the end of the day.
Thanks, Mike. So I have a couple more questions for you, but I want to acknowledge for our participants, we have reserved the last 10 minutes of this webinar for open Q&A. I see quite a few questions already rolling in. So if we haven't covered something that is already on your mind, feel free to drop it into the Q&A and be sure to address it before we end our time here. Mike, I want to talk about outcomes from the PhD program. As folks graduate and receive their degree, where do they go post Darden? We have a couple of profiles for our PhD alumni available on the website, and we've done some full-length podcasts for them. So I'll point those as resources for our participants. But having seen quite a few PhD students come through the program, what are they doing afterwards?
Well, once again, I think it's fair to say that our primary goal is to produce future faculty. And so it is not to say that students who choose to go other trajectories are viewed anything less than a success in their chosen endeavors. But at least the dominant perspective is to think about tenure track positions at other business schools. I can speak to my own advisees that I've had over the years. I've placed students of mine at Stanford, at Wharton, have students at University of Colorado, at Babson. And again, that's a lot of what we're trying to do with this program, and what you'll be trained to do. You'll be trained to do academic research and be able to function in an academic environment, teaching and research in those environments. Not surprisingly, though, the work we do and the position in business school does sometimes open up opportunities in the again, quote unquote, real world, in the business world or other that some of our students have availed themselves to, and that's a fine outcome as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. All right. Well, we could not have a webinar without talking about Charlottesville, our location here at the university. Darden is pleased to have teaching coming out of two locations, both here in our campus in Charlottesville, but also Roslyn. But to my understanding, the majority of the PhD coursework will be here in Charlottesville for at least those first 2 years. So wanted to provide an opportunity for your reflections on our location here. I know you and your family have been here quite some time. I've been a student here in Charlottesville 3 times over, so have a little bit of a different experience. But especially given the research infrastructure that we have here at the University of Virginia, it being located in a college town, how might our location really facilitate a significant learning experience for the PhD students here?
Well, I'm a big enthusiast for Charlottesville. It is one of these charmed places on earth where we have a vibrant college town that brings along with it a very cosmopolitan feel. I can say this after living in New York. We actually, on a pound for pound basis, have a very strong restaurant scene, a very strong music scene, and art scene. That all adds to, I would argue, the intellectual vibrancy of the town. If we look at just the per capita PhDs in Charlottesville, it's very, very high, as maybe one would imagine at a school like UVA in a smaller town. But again, it has amenities that hit way above its size. We're roughly about 100,000 people in the general area here. But what you have is if you're into physical beauty, the great outdoors, as it says on here, is amazing. Just an absolutely beautiful place in the world. Access to any number of outdoor activities. As I mentioned, again, it's a vibrant cosmopolitan city that brings along with it all the things you would have mentioned. I can speak specifically to the entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial ecosystem we have here. It's something I've been involved with for many years, especially with my time at the Batten Institute. We are perhaps a well-kept secret, but we are arguably, one of those handful of emerging entrepreneurial ecosystems in the world. If you're familiar with like Boulder, Colorado, or Austin, Texas, I would argue we're on that trajectory and have the evidence to back that up. You see here, #1 fastest growing venture capital city. We were ranked the #4 best place to start a business. We've had 3 companies have billion-dollar exits in the last 5 years. This is again an entrepreneurial hotbed. Now, what does that mean for your research? Well, obviously, if you're studying entrepreneurship, it's an interesting case study in of itself, and that creates opportunities for access to entrepreneurial ventures and businesses and the like. But if you're more broadly interested in technology, venturing, innovation, it also creates great opportunities. And even if you're, for example, in the QA group, there are companies like Willow Tree, which is a top technology company that you would perhaps have access to and the like. So, wonderful place to live. Can't recommend it high enough. But also very intellectual, stimulating, and opportunity-driven place at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. I'll also add that becoming part of the graduate and professional student community here in Charlottesville is really amazing. I love to see the intersection of students, regardless of academic school or program, and how they find connection. I found that really valuable during my graduate studies, meeting students from other academic departments, the data science school, the engineering school, us talking about our research questions and inquiries, and finding how interdisciplinary some of that exchange could be. Us being here in a college town really facilitates that.
Yeah, I would add, our arguably relative isolation, if you will, or relatively smaller size compared to like a major city, actually works in our favor this way, because unlike other major metropolitan areas where people tend to have their own networks already when they arrive, the fact that people will be arriving here from all around the world for their educational purposes makes it more natural to make that connective tissue, Christian, that you just talked about with others there, and it's just easier than I can imagine in a major city.
All right, so we've got quite a few minutes left in our session here, Mike, and I see that we have quite a few questions in the Q&A to address. So one of the questions here that I think is really instructive is about the sequence of the PhD in terms of that coursework completion in the first 2 years, and then we kind of assume a 4-year trajectory for our PhD students, those remaining 2 years dedicated to comprehensive exams and a dissertation. So while students are in coursework, they would need to be here in Charlottesville to pursue those. But as an advisor, thinking about those last 2 years where our students may have a little bit more freedom and flexibility, what would your advice be in terms of how they spend those and the location that they may find themselves? Would it be acceptable for them to write their dissertation from another location if they have a family or a partner? If you're talking to your advisee, what type of instruction would you provide there?
Yeah, and I hope, I don't know what the direct restrictions are from the university as a fully in time enrolled student when you're in the dissertation phase, but I would emphasize what Christian said, because I know there's this question about part-time and remote. It is our intention and our expectation that you are here full time for those first 2 years. Now, when I say that, that does not mean you do not have flexibility in how you travel and spend your time. But in terms of the coursework and the like, the expectation is you're here physically in the classroom. But absolutely right, as you move into the dissertation phase, there's a lot more flexibility. And I think of it from, I think about my own co-author relationships over the years, and very rarely have I been co-located at the time of writing with my co-authors, even be like former students and the like. So we live in an age where it is very easy to collaborate with people at distance. Very easy to communicate with people at distance. So I think there is a lot of flexibility as you move into the later stages to, be remote and involved with the program that way.
Yeah. Mike, there's another question here about our cohort model approach to the PhD. So we're now reintroducing the PhD program after quite a few years that allowed the previous cohort to complete their studies and finish. And we intend to bring in enroll a cohort for this fall. About how many students do you expect the faculty will enroll for both strategy, ethics, and entrepreneurship and quantitative analysis? And can you talk more about the experience of the cohort model and why we structure it that way rather than enrolling PhD students kind of every year?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's something we've done historically, though we had taken a break, before this upcoming year. Our intent is to do a cohort every 2 years. So we will skip a year basically between that. That will allow us to set up our curriculum. So basically one cohort will move through the curriculum and then transition to the PhD dissertation phase when another cohort comes in. There's a variety of reasons we do that. One is scale. So there is sufficient number of people to learn from and participate in the seminars and the like. The second thing is by having it every 2 years, you have a well-trained latter group eventually who can then help with some of the youngers. Now, that won't be the case for this first group, but fortunately, we do have a vast set of alumni who've come through the program that we can, tap into as well as resources. I think for the cohort, the size that was mentioned, we have some flexibility, but I think it's fair to say across the two programs, we'll probably have about a dozen students is the goal here. Very dependent on the quality of the applications. There might be some variance between the areas, but by and large, we're looking to get about a dozen per cohort.
And then there's also a question here that I think is really interesting about the wide variety of backgrounds that students come to the PhD from. Some will come to us kind of straight from another graduate program. Some will come to us with some professional experience. How do you see all of that being additive to their preparation for the PhD?
Yeah, I think it's definitely our hope and expectation that you have some experience in our program, be it work experience, or maybe you have your MBA or another master's degree. Those are part of what we're looking for. In terms of the background question, and again, I can reflect on my own journey, which, as I started with, is definitely not a linear path. I think the nature of the programs that we have lend themselves to those who have a wide variety of backgrounds, and so we are very open to those types of wide backgrounds. Now, again, if you've been interested in business ethics since you were an undergraduate and you did an undergraduate degree in philosophy and then a master's and whatever, and then you're down, hey, that's great too. Like we're very open to that. But we are not doctrinaire in the way, sometimes you see programs that might say you have to have an econ undergrad and then an econ master's, and then you go. That's not what we're looking for necessarily. So again, if you have that more linear path, wonderful. We're definitely, excited and we'll give strong consideration to your case. But as well, if you have a more eclectic background, we're interested in learning more about you and would definitely be interested in you as a candidate. So this gets back to our theme of, we are trying almost by necessity here to be interdisciplinary, to encourage people with just interesting questions and interesting areas that they want to explore. And then we can craft a program that meets your needs and desires to give you, so you can be successful.
And Mike, there's one more question here that I think might be helpful for participants. Given our discussion about how PhD students have this opportunity to explore a lot of different academic areas and disciplines here at the university, what's the opportunity for them to complete another master's degree en route to the PhD? Is that something that you've seen students accomplish before in other departments?
The one thing, we've done more formally, we haven't done as much with people getting a master's degree in let's say, another school, though those possibilities do exist. It's just a question of, time and the like. What we have done in the past is there have been students who completed the MBA and then got their PhD in business. And there are structures by which that could occur and can be accommodated. It usually adds a little length to your program, at least another year. But we are definitely open to those possibilities. I can, suggest you reach out if that's something that's of interest to you.
Okay. All right, Mike, any parting words to our participants as we wrap up here and as they consider Darden for the PhD?
I'm just looking at some of the questions here. There is this question about funding, and I will just say we basically fully fund our students. There is a tuition reimbursement, and we also provide a stipend. So it is a very generous offering that we have for our students. We also support some of the research and travel as well. So it is a good deal, I will say, in our PhD program.
Yeah, just coming off my PhD, it was quite unique to be able to just pay to think and study.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And look, it speaks to the resources we have, of course, but it just also speaks to our desire that we don't want you to get bogged down on that, right? I don't want that. We don't want that to be the deterrent from you from pursuing our program. We want high quality individuals who are going to do interesting, impactful work in the world. And that's our goal. It's our mandate and what we're able to do.
Okay. Well, I do want to acknowledge that we've come to the end of our time. Also, we will have another application workshop this Friday with Andy Wicks for some of those nuts and bolts questions about the application, like submitting standardized test scores, how should you shape your CV in preparation for the application, responding to that personal statement question. We will also record that one and have it as a resource for all of our interested prospective students as well. So Mike, I want to thank you for this conversation this afternoon. I found it really enlightening as I learned more about the way that we structure our PhD program. I hope our participants have found it informative as well. So really appreciate your engagement. I want to thank everyone for attending this afternoon. Please continue to engage with us as you learn more about the Darden PhD. I serve as the lead member from admissions, supporting all of our prospective PhD students. So I'm happy to help in any way that I can as you consider applying for our program for next fall. But Mike, thank you again. And I'm sure I will see you around Saunders Hall soon.
Thank you, Christian. I enjoyed it.
And that was a recent conversation between Christian West and Professor Mike Lenox, all about UVA Darden's PhD program. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.